All right, back on the Chad Hasty Show. News Talk 790 KFYO, live from the state capitol and broadcasting from State Representative John Frullo's office. And Representative Frullo, I say in studio, in office, in his own office. Now, Representative Frullo, thank you very much for letting us invade your office today. We appreciate it.
You bet, Chad. I love what you've done with the place.
Well, yeah, but when we took over the desk, I was told the chair is a nice, door gift. I can take that with me. I was like, it's a nice chair, by the way.
Well, then Charlie Guerin will leave me with a milk crate. So wait at least till July before you do that.
I can do that. How are things going on the House side of things? We've talked about the Senate a lot today. How are things on the House side?
Yeah, I think they're moving along really nicely, rather nicely. We've had the second, I had the numbers jotted down here, the second most bills that have been filed behind the 81st session, which was 2009. This session we've had 6305 total bills and joint resolutions filed. A little over 4,100 of those are from the House. So the pace has picked up. There's more filing. There was more filing done towards the end. So that'll be interesting. It it's confounding when you hear that everybody's running for smaller government, yet they filed more bills than ever. I've still filed a small amount. There are bills that I think that are important and we want to work on, but there's just a lot of bills filed.
There are.
And probably if this place is better at one thing than anything else, it's killing bills. So I think one of the sayings is that there's a lot of bills filed, there's just not a lot of good bills filed.
Well, when you have 6,000 filed, there are probably a lot of bad bills.
There's a lot of bad bills, exactly.
Mixed in there. Let's talk about some of the legislation that we've heard in the Senate, some of the legislation that has moved forward. That means some of the gun bills, obviously in the House, border issues. But what are some of the other issues in the House that you think will be top priority moving forward right now?
Well, I think the ones that you mentioned, the border issue, and polling, that was if you look at the statewide polls and the information, that was one of the big issues that people had, their concerns. Transportation is going to continue to be a big issue. The infrastructure that we have and use. School finance, of course, with that in the court system, that's going to be a big issue. We'll probably see some movement on that, but some of it will wait till when the ultimate decision comes from the courts. So we'll work with that. Guns, that's a big issue. It's a hot topic. You've got folks that are passionate on both sides. If I had a crystal ball, my guess would be that somewhere we come out with most likely, I'm guessing, a campus carry, and then also we will have an open carry, which I'm guessing that when the governor was here a little earlier, you visited with him. His stance, at least in the papers, has been that the other states have it, we should have it too. I could see that happening from a standpoint of having a concealed carry permit, and then you can go ahead and have an open carry. I and many of my colleagues are not for what people are calling a constitutional carry, which means that we make a constitutional amendment, put in law that you can open carry. The problem with that is people that are not allowed to possess firearms, convicted felons, folks like that, under a constitutional carry would be able to, and so I don't think any of us want that to happen or see that happen.
Was there any momentum at all behind constitutional carry before some of the, I'll put it this way, incidents and the things that made the news with some of the activists who were out there with one particular group before they started getting in different lawmakers' faces? Was there any momentum at all behind?
There was probably some momentum. I don't think it was as strong as ever as a CHL licensed. As you know, a big Second Amendment right on a number of different kinds of guns. I think that that guns are just a lot of fun, but they're also very important for protection. And I'm just not somebody that's going to go strap on a a 45 or 44 or even a BB gun and walk around. It's just not who I am. It's not what I believe, and I think it puts you at a great disadvantage. But there are folks that want that. But the answer to your question is there was probably more before that happened than after it happened, but I still don't see a big appetite for that.
Visiting with Representative John Frullo here on the program. Let's move to tax cuts. That's something that the Senate has talked about quite a bit. We have not heard as much about tax cuts from the House side. Where are we on that issue?
I think we're working at it. Of course, myself personally, with my accounting background, I'm not a big fan of a franchise or margins tax. I think it's very ill-conceived when you could actually have a business that loses money and then you end up having to pay a large amount of money. We made some great changes last session and helped out a number of small businesses. I would say that that's probably going to continue this session. To what extent, I'm not quite sure. You've seen the Senate's bill. You've talked about that. There's a lot of, and it's kind of interesting, pro-business groups that are coming out against the tax cuts as proposed. So we'll have to see all that, how all that works through, what happens, as we get the parties together, get the House and the Senate together, and figure out what it is. There's going to be some tax cuts. We saw that with the governor's, one of his 6 emergency items dealt with that. So we're going to see some movement there. Where it ends up, we'll find out as we get closer to the end.
I know that one of the questions that I've asked some of the other lawmakers when they've been in here is about local control and this debate that has been out there about local control versus liberty. And some of the ordinances, city passed ordinances that have maybe gone a little bit too far. The governor's talked about reining in some of those. There have been bills filed in the Senate about this and the House as well about reining in some of those ordinances. Where are you on this debate about local control and the state reining in some of the ordinances that have been passed by different cities?
I think it actually depends on what we're specifically talking about. And the reason I say that is I have a bill that is actually going to bring knives under state control. And the reason I think in that situation is you have to look at what the person is doing, where they're at, and in my case it happens to do with a pocket knife. It's amazing to me that a relative of Charles Peak, a great guy in Lubbock that has a fundraising company, and with Charles and I have gotten to know each other. It's actually called Genesis. They brought a bill that wanted to unify the laws across the state as far as knives, and we did this we didn't, but the legislature did this a number of years ago with guns. And the problem is I got called from a San Antonio TV station, I believe, or anyhow, media outlet in San Antonio, and they wanted to know about the bill and what it had to do. So I went and I researched how the bill would change San Antonio law, and found out that you can have a knife in San Antonio that if you travel to Corpus Christi would be against the law. And we're talking just pocket knives. And vice versa, you can have a knife that is legal in Corpus Christi, travel to San Antonio, and it would be illegal. And depending on what it is, the severity could be anywhere from misdemeanor to a felony if alcohol is being sold at the place. So somebody that's unsuspecting, carrying a pocket knife in their pocket that they've carried around for 20 years could actually, so I think in those cases where we would normally think that we're safe, then maybe we need some statewide legislation to protect somebody that's doing that. In other cases, I think local control is very important. It's typically, I think down here, local control works until it gets out of control. Mm-hmm. And from that standpoint, I mean, where things just don't make sense. And like the example I just gave you, where one's legal in their hometown and not legal in another one, it doesn't make sense. And I think we're making criminals out of people who had no intention of being criminals in that case.
Do you or other Republicans that you've talked to, do they fear being labeled as big government Republican? I think that's what the Dallas Morning News has labeled the Republican Party in Texas now, the big government Republican, saying that you have the state. If it was the federal government coming to Texas and saying you can't do this, then Republicans would be mad. But Republicans in the state going into cities and doing this, then all of a sudden that's that's different. Do you fear that, or is that a message you're trying to get across? Is, hey, we're trying to protect everyone here by not having this patchwork of laws all over the state?
I think the best thing I have there is I can explain it to them, but I can't understand it for them. And that line of reasoning or that line of logic does not make line of reasoning does not make a lot of logic to me. It depends on the situation. Texting ban is another one that I feel that we need some protection. It used to be you'd see somebody weaving down the road, you thought they were drunk. Today they're texting. You look at them, you say, okay, I know that person's texting. That's something that they, as far as I'm concerned, don't have a right to text and drive. That they could put me, you, our families in harm by not paying attention. We've seen the job that AT&T has done to get out information. Of course, we've got the Brown family out there. What happened there to their daughter is just tragic. And I think that's one case. Then you look at it where different cities have different ordinances. Again, if I drive from Lubbock to Amarillo, what's legal to do in Lubbock without me knowing, just by virtue of passing through Amarillo on my way to someplace further north, I could be committing a crime. And I think that we do, where it's reasonably foreseeable that somebody's going to be traveling, we need to have some sort of standard around the state. And so that's why I agree with that. If people want to get mad at me for saying that's big government, then look at my track record. It doesn't show that history at all, but I think it is protecting the people.
Well, I think you look at a lot of the lawmakers who are talking about this, whether it be you, Greg Abbott, Dan Patrick. I mean, it's hard to call any of those guys liberal and for big government. Yet you have a lot of these big city mayors who are liberal. I mean, you have Anise Parker down in Houston who has never talked about local control in her life, and all of a sudden she's small government. And so there's something that I think cities have been getting away with for a really long time that maybe does need a little bit of reining in from the state.
Well, I think if you look at some of what Representative King is working on, it has to do with the fracking ban. Of course, we've seen what Denton has done, and what his system, or what he's looking at, is saying, well, that's, if you do something like that, but then the state's losing money, you have to make the state whole with that before other things happen. And I think that's fair to some extent. It's like, my understanding is that you make us whole. If you're going to do that and your actions are going to have effect on something else, that you can't have your cake and eat it too.